From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Just 5 days before Brazil's elections, far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro has gained a 10-point lead over his political rival Fernando Haddad in the latest polls. In a Ibope survey, Bolsonaro now has 31% of voters' support, while Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has 21%. In an eventual second round, both candidates will tie the votes. Haddad responds to the latest polls results.
We are suffering from attacks from Mr. Bolsonaro's party, but that's not playing in their favor. It's playing in favor of fascism. The more you stimulate hate, the more fascism will grow, and a substantial part of the Brazilian elite has abandoned social democracy for fascism.
Our correspondent in Brazil, Andre Vieira, brings us more.
We continue to follow the final stretch of the presidential campaigns here in Brazil. On October 7, Brazilians will not only elect the president, but also governors and Congress members. The candidate for the Workers' Party, Fernando Haddad, arrived to Rio de Janeiro this morning. Throughout the day, he will be participating in different events across the city. According to recent polls, Fernando Haddad is now in second place. As such, polling agencies agree that during a runoff election, Haddad will likely beat frontrunner Jair Bolsonaro. Social movements have also intensified their campaigns in the streets, supporting Fernando Haddad. Let's remember that he is the candidate replacing former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva.
Also in Brazil, federal judge Sergio Moro has made public a testimony by former Minister of Finance Antonio Palocci, incriminating members of the Workers' Party in the car wash scandal. The allegation made 7 months ago was dismissed due to lack of evidence. In his testimony, Palocci accuses Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff of being involved in corruption over the national fuel company Petrobras. Juries claimed Moro's timing in releasing the information is to influence voters against the Workers' Party just days before the election. Now let's take a look at the Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad. He entered the race late after the Supreme Court stopped Lula from running. He has already consolidated his second position in the second place in the polls. Fernando Haddad is an academic, a former mayor of Sao Paulo, and a former minister of education. He helped to found 18 universities, 173 school campuses, and 360 federal institutes. The Workers' Party also established an education policy to give more opportunities for Black and indigenous people. Among his proposals are the abolishment of the labor reform, a reform on social investment and privatization policies imposed by President Michel Temer, also a reform of the state system to establish a true commission to investigate crimes of dictatorship, and the development of a basic food income. This Tuesday is the 50th anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre in Mexico. On Monday night, people gathered in Mexico City to commemorate the events. On October 2nd, 1968, an unknown number of student and civilian protesters were killed by police, 2 days before Mexico's first Olympic Games. The memorial featured a presentation by the student leaders mixed with the sound of gunfire.
They resented that the student movement represented life, joy, freedom, democracy, and social revolution. Despite the threat, we did not stop, we did not hide, we were not paralyzed. As young people, we felt that it would not have been decent to bow down to fear. We could not let the people down.
Felix has returned here to the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Mexico City, almost 50 years from the event that changed his life and the entire nation as well, the so-called Night of Tlatelolco. Here the state repressed with violence the student movement of which he was member of, something that was engraved in history.
People know that here at Tlatelolco, a crime against humanity was committed. A crime of genocide remains unpunished.
The violent event, in which armed and paramilitary forces participated under the president's commands, left an undetermined number of dead people. but also mark the future of social and political movements in the country, which are prepared today to pay tribute to the victims of the massacre.
The commemorations organized by student movements are also protests that follow the slogan, "The victims of 1968 are remembered."
Throughout the city, more than 100 events are planned to remember this historical date. This exhibition used images which during those years were not able to be published because of the government's censorship to explain the student movement.
We are helping other people to understand why the movement was so revolutionary. They really tried to change things. We are remembering the 100 glorious days, 3 months of struggle and resistance.
President-elected Andrés Manuel López Obrador recognized the importance of the anniversary and made a commitment to obtain peace.
Here, in this historical plaza, la Plaza de las Tres Culturas, we make the commitment to never use the army again to repress the people of Mexico.
During the 50th anniversary of Tlatelolco massacre, several social organizations will carry out a demonstration to the Zócalo Square, chanting, "October 2nd will never be forgotten."
President Nicolás Maduro has announced that Venezuela's cryptocurrency, the Petro, began operating globally on Monday. The launch of the cryptocurrency seeks to capture foreign investment and will be used as an instrument of payment in the acquisition of goods and services. It's an important tool in the fight against the economic blockade. Venezuelans will also be able to use the Petro to protect their savings.
Beginning on November 5th, the Petro will go on sale on the Venezuelan public. You can buy it in sovereign bolivars and can save with a Petro certificate, which is backed in the Venezuelan oil.
We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few. Welcome back. Chile's Episcopal Conference announced the creation of an official manual for priests that will instruct them on how to act with children. In the document, Santiago's Archbishop clarifies that priests must refrain from any immoral conduct when dealing with minors. A spokesperson from the Episcopal Conference that the manual aims to prevent more causes of sexual abuse in the church. In Ecuador, a wildfire that had been raging since Saturday, 10 kilometers southwest of Quito, was finally put out early Tuesday morning. The fire reportedly burned over 600 hectares of grassland. No casualties were reported. And over 120 firefighters and a helicopter were deployed to fight the blaze. Authorities are still investigating the cause of the fire, but they believe it could have been caused by local farmers or hunters.
There's a speculation that rabbit hunters start the fire, trying to smoke out the animals from their burrows. There is a very reckless behavior because we have to understand that the loss of wildlife is irreplaceable.
After a 36-hour national strike, public sector workers in Argentina have now set up camp outside Parliament to protest against the proposed budget for 2019.
The economic situation in Argentina is hitting state employees more and more. They are one of the groups most affected, with hundreds of layoffs. To express their rejection, they are protesting in front of the parliament against the proposed budget law, which will be under debate in the coming days.
It is the same fear people felt in the 90s, in 2001, and now again in 2018. It is a budget set by the International Monetary Fund with insane infernal cuts that all us Argentinian workers are going to pay for.
This year we only have a 6% pay rise, while it's estimated that inflation will be more than 54% by the end of 2018.
Mauricio Macri is not interested in workers. He's only interested in the companies, and those companies want to control the state.
They have set up camp against the IMF budget with the slogan, "For work, production, and sovereignty." These public sector workers are beginning a new phase of their struggle against the government and its agreement with the International Monetary Fund. They say the government has closed the door on talks and wants to confront the trade unions.
The payment of the foreign debt and the interest has increased. This proposed budget includes 25% devoted entirely to servicing the debt created by Mauricio Macri's government.
Union leaders have presented a report with their main criticisms of the budget bill sent to Congress by the government. They say the government treats public sector layoffs as just another variable in its austerity plans.
They are not going to touch their friends' pockets. Instead, they touch the pockets of workers and pensioners. A new reform is on the way of these benefits that have existed for decades. They want to wipe out our history and the welfare of the Argentinian people.
This occupation and protest by state workers comes as new increases in the prices of fuel and services are introduced. It's set to continue all week with debates, teach-ins, artistic shows, and the presentation of a document which criticizes the agreement with the International Monetary Fund.
And over in Panama, dozens of families fear eviction from settlements. They believe the lack of sound public housing policies is to blame.
The West Province is no longer home to these displaced families. They're demanding that the government make good on its promise to provide them with permanent shelter.
People still take on the construction of their own homes, which means they need land.
Last year alone, there were numerous evictions in communities much like this one, near the bank of the Tapia River. This was because the people do not have fair access to the property market.
People still take on the construction of their own homes, which land.
There are roughly 500 settlements throughout the country, yet still the housing crisis has not been a priority.
A modest indigenous person, a modest person of Afro descent, neither it seems has the right to housing. That is why we are calling on government to help these families who are simply demanding that the fundamental human right to housing is upheld.
The government had campaigned on the promise of greater access to housing, but it is yet to find a solution to Panama's housing crisis. This, even though the country's property market is on the upswing.
After over 100 hours of talks between unions and the government of Costa Rica, there's still no solution on how to end the strike.
As negotiations with the government have proven to be unsuccessful, thousands of union members have decided to continue their strike, which has now entered its fourth week.
We haven't agreed on anything. We were working on a document to reach consensus, but in the end, we rejected every proposal by the government.
Despite hours of negotiations, talks broke down as the government continues to progress their economic reforms through the Legislative Assembly. A clear sign that what workers want doesn't matter.
Our position is that the strike will continue. People must continue taking to the streets across the country. We can feel rejection to this economic reform growing.
The proposed economic reform is made up of 4 laws, one of which will replace sales tax with value-added tax, or VAT.
This economic reform hurts the people. It's seriously hurting the prices of basic goods and medicine.
Workers continue to protest and raise awareness. So far, this is the longest strike in the country's recent history.
Politicians fail to understand that they represent the people. They do not serve the rich. They must listen to the majority, to the workers and the vulnerable sectors of society.
Workers are demanding the economic reform be scrapped and replaced with a new one.
We will sit down and talk once the reform is scrapped. It makes no sense to move forward if they continue pushing this reform.
The government and unions want to resolve the situation, but until that happens, the strike will continue.
The IMF has approved a $290 million extend fund facility for Barbados. The 4-year arrangement will allow for an immediate payment of about $49 million. The rest of the funds will be only released after the successful completion of 7 semi-annual reviews. The new government, which took office in May 2018, inherited a debt of more than $7 billion. Meanwhile, St. Lucia aims to improve its health coverage with a World Bank loan. The bank has approved a $20 million credit from the International Development Association. The project seeks to ensure the people on the island are registered to the National Health Scheme. It also ensures that at least 60% of diabetic and hypertensive patients over 18 are treated according to the national rules. French President Emmanuel Macron has received criticism from France's far right over a photograph during his visit to the Caribbean. The photo shows Macron posing with two young men, one of whom is making a rude gesture. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen took to Twitter to say that France doesn't deserve this. The photo was taken while Macron was visiting the island of Saint Martin a year after the devastation of Hurricane Irma. Back to Argentina, Venezuelan muralist Pablo Calaca has depicted the struggle of the Rio Santiago shipyard workers, a group of workers that has been long fighting for their jobs.
Street art often voices what politicians want to conceal, and Pablo Calaca knows this well. He travels around the world relating the people's struggle. In this case, he went to the city of Ensenada in the province of Buenos Aires, where he painted a mural depicting the history of the Rio Santiago yard workers who are known in risk of losing their jobs.
This was a country that was moving forward, but now I see a country that is being torn down violently. This yard had a strong resonance for me. Hugo Chavez was here with Nestor Kirchner, and on the spot he ordered the construction of 2 ships. The workers want to do their jobs. They walked me down the yard, and the most exciting thing is how proud they are about their work. They showed me this absolutely impressive ship that is like a baby for them. And the Argentinian government is simply trying to shut all of this down.
Calaca is proud to collaborate and pitching with the workers' fight. His drive to finish the mural in only 2 days was following the dream of former presidents Nestor Kirchner and Hugo Chavez.
I am a muralist. We choose public spaces, the street, for political reasons, even if we don't think of ourselves as politicians. Working in a public space is a political work. This always helps to create the statements and principles we want to voice.
Citizens from Barrio Campamento faces massive forced disappearances of workers during Argentina's last dictatorship. They appreciate Calala's initiative.
My
husband lost his job during the dictatorship. He was union leader. When Venezuela commissioned the construction of the ships, we had great joy. When Chavez visited us, we went to see him.
The municipality of Ensenada provided help to Calaca so that people will know of the workers' struggle.
We are proposing a program of what we call open sky murals. The idea is to make this neighborhood, a historic working class neighborhood, famous for its murals. In this case, we received Pablo Calaca. He painted a mural about shipyard workers. Today, we must unite all of the popular struggles.
The workers are not alone. People continue to offer them support against the attacks by a neoliberal government.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. A suicide bomber has killed at least 13 people and wounded more than 30 in Afghanistan during an election rally. The attack happened on Tuesday, and the death toll is expected to rise. Campaigning for the October 20th elections began last week, and security officials have warned about more attacks. A South African radio station, Hot 91.9 FM, has fired a presenter for calling the leader of the opposition party, Julius Malema, a monkey. A statement made by the station described the incident as unfortunate and completely unacceptable, and confirmed that the presenter was fired with immediate effect. Malema's party has also said it will press criminal charges. A wildfire conservation group says the African ivory trade to China is flourishing despite Beijing's ban. According to a report published by the wildlife charity Save the Elephants, the number of items seen for sale has grown by more than 60%. Guinea in West Africa has celebrated its 60th anniversary of independence. Guinea was the first country to gain independence from France on October 2nd in 1958. They were the only ones to choose complete independence as opposed to remain a member of the French community. Here's a look at some other stories from around the world.
Spain's government has rejected Catalonia's demand for self-determination and is pushing for dialogue to resolve the issue of separatism. Head of the Catalan region, Quim Torra, gave Spain a month to accept their pleas for independence. Otherwise, he would withdraw support for the prime minister. However, his ultimatum was not well received.
The
Spanish government doesn't cower to ultimatums and is determined to continue dialogue. This government calls on the Catalan government for calm, that must guarantee coexistence and the right of all Catalans, nationalists and non-nationalists.
Palestinian children have appealed to German Chancellor Angela Merkel to block Israel's plan to demolish their village. Merkel is scheduled to visit Israel and the children of Khan al-Mar. The village under threat in the West Bank want her to take action. Residents and foreign activists have gathered to prevent Israeli bulldozers moving in as the deadline for them to demolish their own homes has passed. Palestinians say the demolition is to make way for Israeli settlements. Pakistan's foreign minister is in Washington, D.C., trying to improve relations after growing hostilities in recent months. Shah Mahmood met with U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton at the White House and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the State Department. The Trump administration says it wants Pakistan to take stronger action against Islamic militants, the Taliban.
A woman accused of posing as a victim of the November 2015 attacks in Paris has gone on trial. Posing as a survivor of the attacks that left 130 dead, Alexandra D. is under trial at the Paris Criminal Court for fraud and false testimony. She could face up to 18 months in jail. The 32-year-old woman received benefits worth about $23,000 after she claimed she had been shot in the elbow.
When an attack has just occurred and the association assists a victim, the association does not investigate them. It would be absolutely dreadful and unbearable for victims who have already been subjected to a violent attack, placed into a world that is not their own, a world of violence, and furthermore be themselves subject to suspicion by the association.
A mock funeral to mark the death of the Brexit has taken place outside the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham, United Kingdom. Protesters have declared the Brexit negotiations dead due to the party's failure to reach a deal with the European Union. So dressed in traditional black clothes, they unloaded a coffin from a hearse and put it outside the conference center. The 2018 World Salsa Festival has ended in Cali, Colombia. Over 3,000 dancers participated in the event. This year's festival was marked by a high level of innovative dance styles. The international juries were impressed with how the dancers risked everything on stage and didn't hesitate to try new dance styles. Over 1,000 children also compete in the contest. We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.